All right, guys, welcome into another hypothetical super conference tier ranking list. This is a true super conference. This is a potential future 20-team Big Ten conference with the addition of Notre Dame, Stanford, Washington, and Oregon to get the Big Ten to 20 teams, which is, in theory, very realistic and maybe one of the most realistic scenarios we currently have when it comes to realignment. So, guys, we've got our tiers. Playoff contenders, obviously self-explanatory. Above average team, that's like an 8-9 win type team on average. An average team is like a 5, 6, or 7 win type team. Below average, typically a team that misses a bowl. And then the worst of the worst, that is going to be probably your teams like Indiana, teams that normally always lose 8 or 9 games minimum. So starting, we've got Stanford, who is a newcomer to this list, and it seems to be a little bit tough to rank Stanford, but projecting forward, they have not been good in the Pac-12, and you're going to a tougher conference. It's only going to get harder. I am putting Stanford and David Shaw in the below average tier, maybe 4 or 5 wins if they're lucky. I could move them to average because they do tend to land some really big-time recruits some years due to their academic prestige, but right now, based on recent trends, their overall recruiting, going to a tougher conference, if they do end up joining this super conference, I've got them at below average. Notre Dame, I think you have to put them in the playoff contenders category, probably more towards the back end, but they've already made the playoffs a few times, and it will likely only get easier with the playoff expanding to very likely 12 teams we expect. The thing with Notre Dame, also the other thing, Notre Dame's recruiting just great. I mean, they have, Marcus Freeman is doing things Brian Kelly never did, so looking at their program trajectory, I really like Notre Dame in the future as a really good team. Ohio State, obviously they're going to be probably the number 1 overall team in the Big Ten for years to come based off of how they've recruited, based off of their overall success. I don't think I have to spend too much time talking about them. Michigan, very interesting debate between between Notre Dame and Michigan. The reason I'm putting Notre Dame above Michigan is because Notre Dame, with this recent recruiting run under Marcus Freeman, it's just better than what Michigan's recruiting at currently. Now, I know Michigan crushed Notre Dame a few years ago in that rainstorm. They just made the playoffs. They've had more recent success. They beat Ohio State. But based off of Marcus Freeman and the hype surrounding that program, looking forward, I'm going to move Notre Dame slightly ahead of Michigan, but they are both playoff contenders, especially in a 12-team playoff format. Next, we have Nebraska. So Nebraska is another one that's really hard to rank. They went 3-9 last year, but they very easily could have went 8-4. They had like 7 one-loss games. So I'm going to say average. Nebraska has the best fan base in college football overall. It's not even close, in my opinion. Anytime you go there, it's a tough place to play. Scott Frost needs to win 7 or 8 games at least to keep his job, and I hope he does it. I hope he does, because I like when Nebraska's good. They still have an amazing fan base. I think they can win 7 or 8 games this year and really get some momentum. The main problem for Nebraska is there's just no elite football talent in the middle of the country. So their recruiting base is completely dried up. They're getting a bunch of 3-stars. Their ranks in the Big Ten are really low in terms of recruiting. Their major problem is overall talent, in my opinion. They've got the atmosphere, they've got the support, they've got everything, but just the recruiting has not even been close. So they are average, probably back end of average. Next, we have Rutgers. So Rutgers, I'm going to say below average. It's tough. This is a very hard conference. Obviously, right now, they're in a very hard division, the Big Ten East. But they are a team that's been better recently. Not too long ago, they were the worst team in Power 5. Now they're respectable. Now there are teams that in the Big Ten, I would say, are worse than them. They're still going to get blown out. They're going to have their games against Michigan, against Ohio State, where they get crushed. But overall, they are a program that is starting starting to at least contend with the middle of the pack in the Big Ten. So I'm going to say below average, but they've got a nice recruiting base in New Jersey. Greg Schiano, veteran coach, former NFL coach. I like the way Rutgers is trending, and I might even move them in front of Stanford just because of their recruiting base. Next, we have Michigan State. So Michigan State, I will say above average. In a 12-team playoff format, you could go and say they are playoff contenders. But the main issue that Michigan State's going to have if this super conference comes into effect, lot harder schedule. You're pretty much a lock to face Michigan State every year, probably Ohio State as well, and then Penn State. We'll see how the schedules work out, but also Michigan State. As good as they've been in the transfer portal, the recruiting just isn't up there yet. It's getting better, with NIL, things like that, Mel Tucker, but I cannot truly at this point put them, they're like right, like if it is a 12-team playoff, they're like right in between above average, solid 8 or 9 win team and playoff contenders, but I just can't do it. I really can't. Next, we have Purdue. So for Purdue, I'm going to say very clearly an average football team. They've had a few years. They had the huge win against Ohio State. We know that. But other than that, it always seems to be 7-6 wins, something like that. They've got Aiden O'Connell, so we'll see how they do this year. But overall, losing David Bell, losing Milton Wright to academic ineligibility, that's tough. So I have them. You could put them in front of Purdue or in front of the Nebraska, but I just think Nebraska has such a better infrastructure. They've got such a better fan base. It would be more likely that Nebraska comes back to life than Purdue. So looking forward, I have Nebraska in front of Purdue, and they both recruit very similarly. I think Purdue might get one, more talented player, or, from Indiana, things like that, but they're very similar in terms of overall talent. Next, we do have USC. So this is going to be one that's pretty tough. You can move USC behind Michigan based off of how they've done recently, but you can move them in front of Michigan based off of Lincoln Riley, based off of getting, the amount of talent he's going to get into that, program, really injecting life into that program. So I think with USC, I'm going to keep them behind Ohio State and Notre Dame. Actually, to be honest, I really want to do this because I just think the overall potential of USC. You already see what Lincoln Riley is doing, getting the number 2 player in the nation, Malachi Nelson, getting a 5-star receiver in Zach Branch, getting the number 1 quarterback transfer, Caleb Williams. The effect he's having, the recruiting is only going to get easier for USC, getting into a bigger conference. They really haven't even weaponized NIL yet, and you've got California, beautiful weather. USC is going to be a powerhouse under Lincoln Riley. I know some people, they're saying, pump the brakes. We'll see. In my opinion, based off of how he's recruited, what he did at Oklahoma, they are going to be really good. So I do have them. I think I'm going to keep them just based. It's like recruiting potential is so crazy. You could, Notre Dame and USC and Michigan are all so close. They're all clearly playoff contenders going forward if we get a 12-team playoff. But I think I'm going to go with those rankings. Next, UCLA. So UCLA's been better recently, and I think they're a program that's trending up. I'm going to say above average. This year, UCLA could be a sneaky 10-win team with Zach Charbonnet, veteran QB returning for his 4th year. So I really do like this team personally. We'll leave them above average. This would be a really tough super conference, but I see 8, maybe 9 wins. The Rose Bowl, they're always going to recruit relatively decently, although that's been a struggle. So we will see if they can get back on track. Next is Oregon. So Oregon is another team I'm going to put in the playoff contenders, probably towards the back end. What they've done with NIL, what they have with Nike, if they got into the Big Ten, the program momentum that they would have, it would be absolutely unbelievable. They got Dante Moore, a 5-star QB. They've got a 5-star receiver committed as well. So Oregon is thriving right now in this recruiting environment. And you could move them in front of Michigan, but right now they've got an inexperienced first-year coach. I want to see how he does. So I'm going to keep Oregon towards the back end of playoff contenders. Next, we have Washington. They're normally a really solid team. I'm going to say with Washington, either the back end of, we'll leave them at the back end of above average because Washington, they've had a few down years. But they went on a run, where they were consistently a really good 10-win, 11-win type football team. They've got a really healthy football program. The Jimmy Lake hiring was bad. They know it. They admitted it. They fired him the second they realized they were going down the wrong path. They made the adjustment and fired him. So I do still have them as an above-average program just based off of the overall success they've had in the past 10 years. Next, we have Minnesota. So Minnesota probably going to be an average team. I will put them in front of Purdue just because they've had a little bit more overall success. Minnesota actually is a team that people are picking this year to come out of the West in front of Wisconsin and actually make the Big Ten championship game. Veteran quarterback, superstar running back. It'll be interesting. But overall, Minnesota in this conference, they would get eaten by these top teams. It's extremely tough, and I would say maybe a back end of average type team. Next, we have Indiana. So Indiana, I am putting in the worst tier. I understand the pandemic 2020 breakthrough season they had was amazing. You go 7-1, you beat Michigan, you almost beat Ohio State. But last year, they didn't win a single Big Ten game. They went 2-10 overall. This year, I would be shocked if they made a bowl game. They're simply not recruiting well enough to really do anything, especially in a conference like this. They are in the Big Ten because of their basketball program. Next, we have... who is this? Oh, this is Iowa. I was going to say, where's Iowa? So Iowa, I think, is a solid above-average team. They made the Big Ten championship game last year. That was their second appearance in Iowa's team history for the Big Ten championship game. So I like Iowa as a program. They always seem to have a really good defense. They've got a good culture. Never seem to have a good quarterback. But Iowa is a solid team. So to be honest with you guys, I think Iowa might have to get moved down. It's tough with all of these teams in this conference. Yeah, I just don't know if they recruit well enough. They did get a 5-star offensive tackle, Proctor, who Ohio State wanted, Alabama wanted. He's a superstar. He is in state, but that was a huge pickup for them. So I will say, we're going to give them some respect. You know what? We're going to give them a little bit of respect. We'll move them in front of some of these teams because Iowa has had a really nice... The problem is just the recruiting is going to be limited a little bit. Next, we have Illinois. So Illinois, I would say, is the second worst team at this point in the Big Ten. There's just not a lot of life in this program with Brett Bielema. It's unfortunate. They've got really... the talent pool is just hijacked completely by Michigan and by Notre Dame. The state of Illinois, it doesn't produce a lot of talent anyways, and the top recruits all get sniped by those better schools. So Illinois, another team that would be eaten in this conference. They just... what do they have? 4 or 5 win type team at best this year. Northwestern, I'm going to say I'll show some respect to Pat Fitzgerald and I'll put them in the below average tier, but you could also make an argument they should be in the worst tier. They're a really inconsistent team. One year, they're the lovable underdog. They win 10 games. The next year, they're literally 1-8 in conference. So they're an extreme. This is the year you would think, because they've been so bad, this is the year they would have a good year, but I don't see it happening, honestly. I think Northwestern's going to be really bad again this year, but I do have respect for Pat Fitzgerald, so I'll move them up just based on their success they've had, making the Big Ten championship game twice, move them up to below average. Next, we do have Maryland, below average. Maryland's another team I would say below average. I would put towards the front end of below average just because they seem to be able to recruit some talent. Their state has talent. You take a look at District of Columbia area. There's a lot of talent around them. So they can get some solid 4-star players. They've gotten kids in the past. They've got 3 really good receivers right now. But overall, Maryland, I mean, my goodness, especially in this conference, you're looking at 5, maybe 6 wins at best. Next, we do have Penn State. So Penn State, I am going to put towards the end of playoff contenders if we're talking about a 12-team playoff. James Franklin, unbelievable job last year recruiting. Penn State and their fan base, they know they've got to have a big year on the football field this season. They've had back-to-back really down seasons. You can't make it 3 in a row. You got to at least win 9, hopefully 10 games, try and beat Michigan. This is a year for Penn State to really try and do something, even with Sean Clifford, because they've got the superstar quarterback coming in. He's not ready right now. Drew Aller, he's not ready, but he's coming in. They've also got a superstar 5-star running back who's going to be a true freshman. So they've got an amazing young offensive nucleus. Recruited extremely well last year. That is why I think they're a back-end playoff contenders type team. And you really could switch this around in a number of ways, but I'm going to leave it like that. Next, you have Wisconsin. So Wisconsin, I just don't think they recruit well enough, especially in this conference, but I will put them at the front of the above average. I have a lot of respect for Wisconsin, and this 20-team super conference would be absolutely loaded, ladies and gentlemen, with playoff contenders, above average team. The only reason Wisconsin would not be seen as a playoff contender is just the recruiting. But you could make the argument in a 12-team format, but we also have to factor in if this 20-team conference happens, Wisconsin's facing a lot of these teams. So it becomes very tough. Just looking at this, maybe I might have overrated UCLA. Maybe UCLA should be down in average. I don't know. They've been good recently, though. They have been good recently. Either way, this is a loaded 20-team conference that is jam-packed. You can see the 6 additions, USC, Notre Dame, Oregon. Amazing things here. So, guys, this is just a mock. Who knows what's going to happen? I think the most likely scenario, Notre Dame and Stanford go to the Big Ten. And then on top of that, to get to 20 teams, it would be Oregon and Washington. Although we've heard rumors about maybe, the Big Ten being extremely interested in North Carolina, Duke, Virginia, schools like that. So that could be a thing. This is just a fun thing to do to see how the conference would line up. And it is an absolute behemoth, folks. Absolute behemoth. But guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.